Oh, welcome back to another episode of Who's to Say. I am your host, Tom Foolery. Thrilled to be with you as we are now headlong into Scorpio season. Only recently, this is October the 23rd, a glorious Wednesday. The sky is blue and clear, which is a rarity, as you may know if you've investigated any of the titillating topics from the last episode, which was recorded on the full moon last week, and in which there was a heavy dose of information, or at least illusions to the information around stratospheric aerosol injections. We're taking this in a totally different direction this time. This is much more grounded today. Although, as with most things, and this will certainly be a theme of what we're talking about, the intimate interconnectivity that we take for granted. And this is with a special focus today on fascia and tensegrity, which are the burgeoning fields of comprehension for how we can better know our bodies and how they move through space and how they evolve over time. And one of the challenging parts of this podcast is the obligation I feel to sort of iron out my rough ideas on the fly and vocalize these ideas as they exist in between my ears so that they do make some level of sense to communicate to people. And it's not that these thoughts aren't always churning in my head, because they are. It's just that I notice how very fine the threads are that connect things in my own mind, and I want to see if I can weave them together to make a clear picture so that it can be easily disseminated to other people. And that's why I admire people like Thomas Myers, who will get a lot of flowers today for how he presents this information. Because yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a challenge to how we think of, especially the structure of our bodies, and the misinformation and the misunderstanding of our bodies, what they're capable of, what they're here for, what they contain and maintain. As usual, there's an argument that there's some deliberate uh, disinformation there to keep us from harnessing our greatest powers in physical form, and certainly that warrants the union of spirit and matter. And yet matter is just energy moving slow enough for us to feel and to see. And the inputs that have great impact on our matter, that we feel, I mean, this body that I think we know that it's always changing. I mean, how you develop a new suiting of skin every, I think it's at least once a year, but the turnover of organs, certainly cells, if you can fast, you do get a quicker turnover of refreshed cells. Uh, yeah, organ casing, certainly blood, mucous membrane. I mean, those things are in constant evolution. And one of the core philosophies that I want to bring to bear today in relation to the conversation around tensegrity and fascia is that of tissue salts and the role that they play in the regeneration of our biological systems. And with that, we'll jump right in without any further ado. I don't think I have much housekeeping. I'm working on some really fun and quality sponsors for the program here so that I can connect you all with the portals, as I've termed them, that have transported me to different levels of performance and health. And one final word for tissue salts. We'll give them their shine in a minute. They are not supplements how we think of them. So the great hurdle with supplements is that it's not, and just like food and just like water, and this is certainly a focal point of the discussion around enhancing the quality of your water is that it's not only what your body consumes, it's what it absorbs. And the issue, one of the many issues with dead food or dead water, is that you have to spend so much of your life force energy, so much of your energy period. I mean, like we talked about last time, the heat processes, the sustaining processes of assimilation and digestion and absorption, among others, to bring any semblance of nutrients into your body for healing, regeneration, vitality, all of that. With dead food, which would be processed food, or it can even be animal and plant foods that are closer to death because they were cultivated in environments that were anti-life. I mean, yeah, if you're suppressing the existence of an animal, or if you're constantly spraying or subduing or decimating a plant, it is closer to death. And so one of the issues with that is that you can look at a plant with its chemical profile, and you can do the same with an animal, and say, all right, this slab of ground beef, I can get 20 grams of protein out of it. There we go. I'm on my way to my macros for the day. Not necessarily true if, because that food was closer to, it wasn't from a vital animal, then you don't have a high level of bioavailability. You might get a fraction of whatever that biochemical profile is. So it's the same with water. As you think, okay, I'm going to hydrate myself. Well, not if it's contaminated with fluoride and heavy metals and manganese, and I mean those are generally some fairly poisonous substances. If it's chaotic and stored in your local tap water reservoirs, then it's chaotic and doesn't have the ability to assimilate into the structure of your exclusion zone water, which is a topic for another time. All of this to say, when we get to I guess the third realm of diet and nutrition, which would be supplements, it's becoming increasingly hard to find. Well, let me amend that. There are certainly some world-class products. I mean, that's why I appreciate Symbiotica and what they've cultivated with liposomal products that are more easily absorbed into your body, into the systems that something like a zinc complex or a glutathione is destined to go to your liver or to your kidneys, etc. However, there's still a bioavailability issue with supplements because they're somewhat synthesized, meaning that they don't exist purely in their complex form of an animal food or of a plant food or of a grain or anything like. Grain's still a plant food. What is exceptional and unique about tissue salts is that they are absorbed directly into your bloodstream, and they are I mean, that is probably the highest level of absorption that you can get for an external substance. I mean, of course, it still has to have the ability to be processed and absorbed into the organ and tissue systems that are required. And that is, I think, one of the most alluring aspects of employing that. I'll have to devise a better word than supplement because, as I said, it's more than that. These are essential organic and inorganic compounds that we rely on for wholeness, for health, and for regeneration, which would ostensibly extend our not only our lifespan but our health span beyond what we currently think of as, oh, it's a good life if I live 7 decades. When I was with my brothers out in Texas, we had a great running joke when we were talking about the spiritual teachings of whether it's Atlantean people or other cultural groups from antiquity that used to live to 500 or 600 or 700 years. As I mentioned, I've been enjoying the lore of Tolkien through the Lord of the Rings and recently the Rings of Power, and the elves and the elves live millennia. I mean, they are immortal, but there were also men or at least races of men and dwarves that lived hundreds of years. And so the running joke with my guys was, we used to be better. And I think something like tissue salt and having a deeper understanding of our fascial structures and the webs that really co-create us would help extend us to a better time. And I mean that better time in the future. And also, this is the great wheel of life, is that we would be returning to the tail of the snake with our head, so to speak. So let me cue up what I think is a great starting place for, make sure we have audio for this fascia discussion. We don't need to see too much of me, or do we? Let's see if this goes full screen. Let me see what this looks like. Yeah, that's better. All right, so this is Thomas Myers. I don't think he has much of an introduction. And he has filtered into my purview thanks to the work of functional patterns, which is a really, if you're not familiar with functional patterns, it's worth an investigation of your critical thinking for sure, because they challenge a lot of what we think of as necessary modalities for movement and fitness. And I mean, by and large, I'm picking up what they're putting down. And a lot of people, this is a great logical fallacy that we encounter, and I'm certainly vulnerable to this as well, is that they do have a rather pugilistic, I would even say, certainly an antagonistic way of circulating their message, harping a lot on how other people have it wrong and they have it right, and you're going to run the risk of alienating people when you do that, especially with all of the momentum that goes into, I mean, they especially go after the sacred cows of barbell deadlifting and squatting, and because there are these massive achievements that have come out, well first of all, I mean, to pick apart some of the logical fallacies of this, what people deem to be the bastions of performance, especially in maximal strength, is they look at what people do with a barbell on their back or in their hands, and that's just one way of testing strength. I mean, what's so exquisite and entertaining about strongman, if you've ever seen World's Strongest Man competitions, I have fond memories of, I think it's late spring, maybe early summer. Those used to be televised on ESPN Classic or even ESPN when I was growing up, and to watch any man, let alone these huge men and women, pick up an Atlas stone is so much more impressive. I mean, especially when you do it yourself, whether it's an Atlas stone or a sandbag, these irregular shapes that, still, I mean, they're still moving them at a couple 100 pounds. That's way more impressive to me than just this stagnant, limited plane of a barbell deadlift that you're dragging up your shins and you're just bending over and trying to stand tall with it. Impressive, no doubt, and I've seen some really remarkable feats of strength with that. However, the more that I come to develop my highest and best comprehension of the body and its complexity and its dynamism, then what it would take to get low, sink down, pick up a very heavy ball, hug it to your chest, straighten up as best you can, move it up onto a shelf. I mean, that's about as impressive as it gets for me. And so functional patterns highlights their big four, if I'm remembering correctly: running, throwing, swing. No, I don't want to misrepresent what they're about, but they've certainly simplified the different types of motion. I mean, I started with the primal movements that Paul Chek popularized in his work. So gait, so walking and running, although they are significantly different in a lot of ways, they're different enough. Gait still contains them both, however. Pushing, pulling, throwing, hinging, squatting, lunging. And so there's a lot of overlap with those movements. To bring us back around so we can dive into the discussion about fascia, functional patterns I'm appreciating because they are tapping into these concepts and these percepts of our fascial system, because it is universal, at least in our microcosm of our bodies, and then the complexity of movement that for which fascia is the underlying web, which we're about to learn about here, thanks to the work of Thomas Myers.
I'm really pleased to talk about Tensegrity. This is one of the most central concepts to the new biomechanics. I don't really see how you can understand the way the body works without it. Do you know that all biomechanics?
Oh, sorry.
And compression.
We were jumping ahead there, which we're not quite ready to do. That would be putting the cart before the horse. What I want to go for is this one about fascia.
Fascia is a perfectly good medical term that has been incorporated, neologized, brought into a different meaning. The medical meaning for fascia is certain sheets of biological fabric inside the body. So we talk about plantar fascia and plantar fasciitis. It's actually the plantar aponeurosis. We talk about the thoracolumbar fascia. It's actually the thoracolumbar aponeurosis and other things. We needed a word that would describe the whole net. Your body is held together by a net. If you're 65% water, depending on how fat you are, you're somewhere near 65% water. And
I don't know if this is an older video. I highlight that on a molecular level, total biological makeup, we are closer to 99% water. And these are the polarities and the paradoxes that we all find a way to hold space for. Is that as much as I spoke last time about our fiery systems, again, we know ourselves to be alive when we're warm. We depend on our digestion, which is very much a heating to break down the nutrients that we absorb. Electrolysis, electrolytes, the transfer of information throughout our bodies is, since it's closer to electricity, it is dependent on fire. Our heartbeat, our blood, all have to be warm for us to be alive. And the water is this substance in which that all takes place throughout our body. We do have this fluid, softer makeup. And so, not to split hairs, I want to emphasize, as he's doing here, whether it's 65 or 99, it's still a compelling majority of our physiological makeup is water.
And how old you are. And why doesn't that water just end up as a puddle at your feet? Why don't you just have great big balloon legs? Because the fascia, because the biological fabric of the body, which is not dissimilar to the plastic in a plastic carrier bag that you bring your groceries home in, that fascia organizes the water into cells, organizes the cells into groups of cells called fascicles because they're surrounded by fascia, and organizes that into a bag that you might call a muscle, and organizes that inside a bag. It's bags within bags within bags within bags, all the way down to the cellular level. You can just think of an orange. An orange is an easy way to think about that. Each drop of juice is contained within one of those little cells. Those cells are contained within the section. The section is contained within the rind of the whole orange. It's the same for a human being. You have small droplets of water, gel, but very watery gel, combined in a membrane, combined in a bigger membrane, combined in a bigger membrane, combined in the membrane of the whole body. So we really haven't had a word for that whole web work. We haven't had a word for that whole network. So fascia has been incorporated as a term for that whole webbing.
Well, one thing I want to add here for context, because he did a good job of at least introducing the essence of structure. And this is why the conversation is evolving around the importance of structured water, because if you have chaotic water that's been sitting in plastic bottles on the shelves in a supermarket for months, years, weeks, whatever, or in the PVC pipes of your home from your chaotic public reservoir, that is chaotic water, which we are then not able to aid the structures. And again, it's not that it ends up at a puddle at your feet, like he says. We're just not reifying our interior structural systems, which allow us to transfer nutrients, to transfer the energy of thought and feeling and reflex and intuition. So those are some of the advantages of drinking and bathing in and cooking with structured water.
Soft tissue webbing of the body. Now, in fact, that same kind of webbing goes right through your bones, and it goes right through all the cartilage that's at the end of the bones on your joints, and the cartilage that's right in here, and the cartilage that's in between your vertebrae, and all of that. That web work goes through all of it. It's very much like leather, like your belt or your shoes. That kind of thing is the fascia inside a bone, but then the bone has been impregnated with calcium salts, so it has that solidity. So you can either pull on a bone or push on a bone, and it will resist either one of those forces. Tendons, if you push on it, it's going to collapse, but it's great for tension. So tendon, in the new use of the word fascia, tendon is part of the fascia. All of the fascia that goes around the muscles and within the muscles and through the muscles and around the organs and through the organs and in between everything, it's all this network. And the only reason that it's new, it's not a new tissue. You've been dealing with, if you're a trainer, you've been training fascia since you started training. If you're a body worker, you've been working with fascia since you put your hands on the body. You can't avoid it. It's right under the skin here. So you're going to come in contact with it. The only thing that's new, what's new is we're considering it as a system. We've thought about the plantar fascia, we've thought about the Achilles tendon, you can think about the central tendon of the diaphragm, you can think about the nuchal ligament. All of these are simply zip codes, or postcodes for those of you outside the United States. These are areas, but they have no separation. It's really important that you understand this. The science is that there is no separation between these things. We have made the separation. We came along with a scalpel. We cut out the plantar fascia and said, see, plantar fascia. We cut out the biceps and said, see, it's a muscle called a bicep. But when in the action of cutting that muscle out, we cut it away from all the connections that it has. My work, the anatomy trains, is that the biceps has a connection up and down the arm. It goes up from there into the pectoralis minor and down from there to the thumb. There are specific connections from the biceps, north and south. There are also connections from the biceps, east and west. It connects to the brachialis. It connects even over the intermuscular septum into the triceps fascia. When you are doing your preacher curl, you may be training the muscle of the biceps, but you're training all kinds of fascia around it.
2 points that he's highlighting here, which I think are so well said and should be trumpeted from every rooftop, is that, first of all, the dissection of scientism. It's the nature of the beast. We're not going to beleaguer it any more than we are. We've already beaten that dead horse, unfortunately, to a pulp. Just to further magnify the issue is that it isolates it in looking to, how should I say this? It robs us of the ability to connect and feel connected to this web. And I intuited this early on, is that pretty much if I move consciously, every workout is a full body workout. And yes, you can be, well, I guess you can qualify this. Thanks to Paul Check, it was pointed out to me that when you use fixed anchors, if you're seated for a seated quad extension or doing an upright row where your chest is against the bench, if you're doing a bench press where you're laying most of your body down on a bench, you are detracting from your workout, because truly you're taking out certain segments of the body that you'd otherwise rely on for balance and for muscle recruitment, to say nothing of the spine. I mean, yeah, when you depend on a surface to restrict motion, then yeah, I mean, you do compromise the integrity of your spine, and that's why I'm so into this work. So especially if you're standing, I mean, yeah, he uses the example of the preacher curl where you would have a bench underneath your tricep in order to just curl. You're still using the shoulder and the chest and your upper back. It's impossible to truly isolate, because there's so much more. Where motion originates from is somewhere other than, it's not just in the bicep. So that I really appreciate, and as we get into the connection of tissue salts and tensegrity with fascia, we come to align our movements and our choices with understanding that there is no separation, there is no isolation. My plantar fascia does not exist separate from what goes on with my shoulder, with my neck, with my scalp, with my chest. It is all related, and we'll drive this point home in a minute, but I wanted to give a shout out to that aspect of this discussion.
You're training the fascia that goes to the brachialis. You're even training the fascia of the triceps. I didn't say the muscle. You're training the fascia of the triceps when you're doing abruptly curl. And the ligaments, we've thought about the ligaments. Oh, nothing's happening with the ligaments, nothing's happening with the ligaments, nothing's happening with the ligaments. Bang, the ligaments come into use only when I get out to the end of the motion, whatever that end of the motion is. First I hit the muscle, then I'm going to hit the ligaments. And if you put my arm behind my back and lifted it up like you were my older brother trying to get me to do something, that pushing the head of the humerus against the weak part of the ligamentous capsule in the shoulder will persuade you to do anything that your older brother says. So this whole set of stuff works together in movement. And it also, this was the fundamental insight of Ida Rolf, it deforms in response to your attitude. And I'm using the word attitude deliberately because I mean both the outer attitude, your posture, the way your body is in space, but the inner attitude as well. You don't see very many people going around going, I'm so depressed. If you're really going to be depressed, and if you're really going to get any joy out of being depressed, you have to take the posture that goes with being depressed.
Okay, so that last part I love as well, because I did that episode a year ago, maybe more, maybe at the start of the podcast. Honestly, the anatomy of happiness. This is a cornerstone of the functional patterns work as well, is posture. And posture is a moving target because even though you're standing still, or even though, I'm not sitting still, I'm constantly moving. I can't help it. Not only is it a restlessness, it's also something I feel is natural to be in some level of constant movement. And that's balance and that's posture. And those are two sides of the same coin, I believe, because you can't have one without the other. It is these relentless micro calculations that your body does to keep you not only upright. I mean, this goes beyond any discussion of density or gravity, as the functional patterns guys talk about. Certainly it's a reflection of our inner mood, and there is a posture that goes along with confidence and high ego and vitality. We know that. Of course, vital people can have their own postural issues and injuries, and I've certainly been through that. Although these days I do ascribe a lot of my excellent feeling to what I'm learning through functional patterns, and that has a lot to do with how I care for and treat my fascia, with not only the release. The release, I mean, a point I'll make about myofascial release, which I believe people have seen the value to, and yet they still seem to latch on to stretching. The way it's been described to me through functional patterns, among other places, is that one of the perils of stretching is that if you have something that's already tight, a muscle, as we feel it, even though it can be the fascia surrounding it, if you think of a band, rubber band, exercise band, doesn't matter, and you tie a knot in it and you stretch that band, what's going to happen to that knot is it's going to tighten even more. What happens with stretching is that we do get temporary relief, because for however long the muscle belly, you take a hamstring or you take a hip flexor or a lat, and because it's so long, and because, first of all, you're not able in a stretch to pinpoint that one knot or that one point of tension as we feel it, you do get some moderate relief over the whole of the muscle membrane. However, you're not getting to the root of that problem, and you're not even getting to, as I said, the precise locale of that knot. And that's why myofascial release is so valuable, because you can, with the surface of a lacrosse ball, a medicine ball, volleyball, I mean, there's a lot of great tools out there. You can hone in on that one point and truly unlock that. And one of the interesting things about these points, I mean, trigger points or adhesions are what they're referred to in this lexicon of fascia. I'm reading from my notes here. The vast majority of water around our connective tissue supports the information highway that I've talked about. And that's an instantaneous circulation of information that surpasses the central nervous system. We'll talk about that another time. Softened tissue holds more water, and these releases are, when we do myofascial release, it is about creating more circulation, more fluidity for energy in motion so that the water and the electrolytes can circulate better. Magnesium is a core element which we depend on for that circulation. And it's the knots and the injuries and the adhesions, this rigidity that are the body holding on to something. And in the beautiful world of this reality, I'm coming to a grasp of this philosophy that has a lot of legs to it, and as I can see it, that there are no exclusively physical symptoms. So especially that's the case. I mean, I will have to extend this particular presentation to give credit to the work of Eileen McCusick. She is a great, unless I can bring it up now, which would be really cool, because then we could talk about some particular examples of, let's get into it. This is not a perfect extrapolation of what I'm talking about. However, perfection is elusive. So this is Eileen McCusick's, how do we describe it? This is so Eileen McCusick, who I've spoken about before for her work in the human biofield. This is a depiction of that, and this elucidates the emotional, or you could say subconscious, aspects of our anatomy. And I would argue, I'm trying to hone in on my own experience with this. So especially these days, I encourage people to check out the video that accompany these podcasts. Are usually released within 24 hours of the audio coming out. And so, 30-minute mark, you can come back to this so you can get, and I'll include this in the show notes as well so you can follow along. But this is part of why we cannot deny the polarities in our life that include gender. And because we have a right side and a left side of our bodies, and we may associate a certain handedness and a certain aptitude, of course, with our physical abilities that are relevant to our physical experience. What I mean by that is that, through German New Medicine, we have a template for symptoms of if someone is either right-handed or left-handed. There's a dominance there. There's a way in which they feel. Of course, if someone's more left brain, right brain, if someone is more masculine or feminine in their personality expression, then we can see a preponderance of symptoms based on this distinction of the halves of our bodies. So I'll say, to make this personal, to exemplify what we're talking about here, that when we look at the right side, which is the masculine side, and if you see there's a section of the upper body which is close to the heart chakra, as it's delineated in this pictograph from Eileen McCusick, in the human biofield, which, this has to do with resonance and on a tonal scale, and she does some really exquisite work with that. I'm tying this into our discussion around fascia because I can see the veracity of this. So close to the heart chakra, which would be chest level, and for me it's upper back, where I have a particular adhesion that comes up, is saying yes when we mean no, caretaking, accommodating behaviors. And the symptom of that is that, I can point to some injury history. I can point to, again, some recurrent adhesions in my fascia in that area. And that's an offline revelation. Suffice it to say that I can acknowledge where I say yes when I mean no, and I'm forfeiting my ability to draw a boundary in my biofield, and of course what I think of as my personal space, and that manifests into a physical symptom that, I mean, yes, I can and do work on it physically with my myofascial release, with my hydration, with my mineralization, to make sure that I embrace proper hydration beyond just water. Of course, my water is structured as well. It's filtered. I check a lot of boxes there, and I do that. It's up to me to tune into the catalyst of, all right, is there a physical approach that is going to heal the emotional, or is it vice versa? Can I tackle the emotional aspect that will then absolve the physical expression? And I think it's worth playing with it both ways. I mean, if you look into German New Medicine, or if you look at this chart and it spurs some curiosity within you about, okay, how can if we go down to the knees, a lot of people have knee issues. True enough. Here's another personal one for you. My right hip issues related to, in this particular breakdown, there's so much nuance and beautiful depth to this imagery here. What I'll focus on sort of a precursory level for a moment is what we can look into for symptoms with the right hip area, root chakra, is busyness, overdoing, and overthinking. Absolutely guilty of that, and it has produced some not just one traumatic injury, but recurrent associations with pain in that area, that when I have had the most profound relief of that pain and the most freeing experience where I don't feel inhibited by that anymore, is when I go into feeling and action and maybe some level of rest to balance out the busyness that I might feel there. So my challenge to anyone listening is to play with first visiting the physical manifestation of an emotional issue and saying, okay, how can I treat the physical? This is not to say skirting root causes. This is just, I mean, you can still get to a root cause of physical issues, which I'm about to delve into in a moment with the Tensegrity discussion. Or am I brave enough to go into my shadow and go into what I'm not looking at with open eyes and open heart, and saying, can I heal and resolve the emotional aspect? And will that then, if I focus solely on that, will it relieve some of my physical pain? I think both are worthy pursuits. It's just a matter of what you feel best equipped to engage with. And for a lot of us, it is the physical. There's a lot of information out there. We still need to be discerning and intuitive about how we engage with that information. I'm circulating the best information as far as I know, for our mutual and universal benefit, which is why I will now share the Thomas Myers breakdown of Tensegrity, and I won't spoil any of the aspects of that. At least I hope so. I've been having some tech issues with these programs, because I'm trying to give you guys the best experience, because you deserve it, because you're worthy of it. Let's see where I get with this. You devil, son of a gun. I don't think we're going to be able to get into, I might have to do some good old reading for you. So, which is fine. I know how to read. You know how to listen. That should be sufficient. And I will link to the video, because it is, I think it is on their page on anatomytrains.com. So shout out to Anatomy Trains, Thomas Myers, fucking legend. I will link to his breakdown of this, because it is a fascinating visual. For my own notes, Tensegrity is a term coined by architect Buckminster Fuller, as the combination of tension and integrity. Easy enough. It describes a structural system where the integrity of the structure is maintained by a balance between tensile, tension, and compressive forces. Applied to the body, tensegrity explains how muscles, tendons, ligaments, and bones interact to create a stable yet flexible framework that supports movement and posture. So those two pillars are imperative and invaluable for us to hold space for here. The dynamic interaction of muscles, tendons, ligaments, and bones, which, although it is referred to as a musculoskeletal system, I don't know if, again, we dissect. I mean, this is the age of scientism. We look at ligaments on their own. Okay, you've injured your ligament, or you've damaged this tendon, or you've severed this muscle, or you've broken this bone. And in those moments of crisis and trauma, that is when we really break out the scalpel, and we really only get into this blinder view. I mean, we fail to see the, just bringing up my notes here so that it might be a little bit easier for us all to engage with. If you want to read along, of course, that dissection does not help heal, because again, we are this complete system. We are this holistic system. And so I've been seduced by this tensegrity model because it seems to hold space for this web of being. And one comment on that I've spoken to before, and it was one of my the perils of isms. I believe it was scientism, or maybe it was corporatism. Either way, it's no coincidence, because we don't have coincidences in this realm. Even if we can't see every effect of every cause, or if we can't even name the cause or the effect, still no coincidence. Every purpose, every reason it exists. There's a reason it's called the internet, or the World Wide Web. I mean, do I need to say more? Okay, fine, I will. To be a little pedantic, which helps me. I mean, it's not to dumb things down for you. It's just to draw these parallels so that we can appreciate where we live. And so the ubiquitous nature of the internet, the web, not only, I mean, I refer to it as this net that ensnares, it confines, it traps. Okay, fine, we do have some experience of that. At its best, it is this constant access to connection, and we can use that for our benefit to stay in touch with the information and the relationships that we choose. Of course, we can be overly connected, and it can be overwhelming. To tie this back in, our muscles, tendons, ligaments, and bones in our musculoskeletal structure, they don't exist independent of one another. And this system of balance with tension and compression is how we express ourselves physically, especially for those of us who are athletes and love to move and test our strength and speed and pliability. Then it behooves us to have a better education around this one body that we depend on for everything. I mean, we depend on it for our experience. I mean, let's acknowledge how profound that is, that this is our only way of experiencing. And as I mentioned before, I mean, if you lose an arm or a leg, or your sight or your ability to hear, you absolutely still have an experience. It is limited, but it is not lost. And this is why I'm so passionate about our ability to be more than we ever thought we could. Because we're still sort of infants when it comes to how we think we know ourselves. And so, again, referring to my notes here, in a tensegrity structure, certain elements experience tension, that would be muscles and tendons, while others bear compressive forces, obviously the bones, especially the spine. The spine is almost something else entirely. It does house our meridian and our chakra system. So there's an ethereal nature to the spine, which certainly has a physical presence. Just to say, it's more than just spinal bones. So the balance between these forces allows the structure to be stable and mobile at the same time. Fascial continuity suggests that the myofascia acts like an adjustable tensegrity around the skeleton, which is a continuous inward pulling tensional network like the elastics, with the bones acting like the struts in the tensegrity model, pushing out against the restricting rubber bands. So that, if you'll forgive me, that's in particular reference to the video with the tensegrity model, so I'll refer you to that. Suffice it to say, by way of simplifying, that this inward pulling, this spiraling, if you will, or this how do the maybe not quite spiraling, but a tilting. I mean, this is exemplified in the Weck method of head over foot. As you walk, as you run, this teetering, this tilting is something, and this transfer of weight with your nose over your toes, your head over your foot as you walk and run. That does help create a torsion. There it is, a torsion. That is how we can generate some level of power and force, of course, but it's also just a fluidity of balance. And if we only try, I mean, there's so much misguided encouragement for rigidity. When you're doing something like a deadlift or just picking something heavy up, of course you need some rigidity. However, it ignores the interplay of everything that we're talking about here, where some fluidity is required. An interesting example here to bring all this together is a bicycle wheel, where the spokes are under tension and the rim is under compression, which gives the wheel its strength and stability, yet it can spin and move. And I think that's an apt example for what we're talking about here, is that it's more than just one thing going on at a time. It's not for a hinge to take place. It's not just bending at the waist and keeping this fixed spine. You still have something pulling on your spine, with whether if especially if that's that weight out in front of you. There is a tension, and yet there's also a compression, and yet we still got to move whatever the fuck we're moving. I mean, it's not, that, especially to our center point of fixity, which is our standing neutral spine. I mean, that's the point where we're always looking to get back to. That's our homeostasis. Sure, we spend plenty of time sitting. Fair enough. I'm doing it now. I have been for 45 minutes. It's not where I'd love to be. It is the nature of this program, though, because if I were taking my show on the road and walking and running while I would do this, I don't know if it would pack the same punch. All this to say, mastering our posture around standing, with or without tension, I mean, there will be some limited tension, is a practice in and of itself, because that is the space from which we then move and act and experience. And so it's certainly something, as I said, worthy of our mastery. The global connectivity aspect of this is really essential as well, and I want to dive deep on this as best I can in our remaining time. In a tensegrity model, a change in tension or compression in one part affects the entire system. Similarly, the body is interconnected. An injury or imbalance in one area can influence distant parts of the body. I will qualify my notes there to say imbalances more often than not precede injury. And to read further into this, water break. Put strain into a tensegrity structure and the deformation will get distributed all over the structure. Continuous compression structures like buildings do not show this property, but bodies do. Load one corner of a building with a huge amount of snow, and that corner might collapse, leaving the rest of the building intact. Load a tensegrity structure, and it will distribute the strain around the whole structure. Ergo, where will a strain compression structure break? Where the strain is greatest. Where will a tensegrity structure break under strain? At its weakest point. If we are a tensegrity structure, the load that is causing pain or strain in the low back, for example, may be sourced in the foot or the shoulder. So we have to be able to see the pattern to know where to intervene. And I think that last sentence is apropos of something we take for granted, which I've alluded to and maybe mentioned in some detail before. It is our feet. that are in constant contact with the ground and therefore are, you could argue, the foundation. The feet, connecting to the spine through the legs. I mean, again, they're all important aspects of the system. The feet are unique because they are in constant contact with the ground and therefore set us up for stability or instability or imbalance issues. And it's not just how they're placed. Of course, it's their composition, it's their flexibility, it's their strength. And that's why I'm so grateful I had Graham Tuttle on, the Barefoot Sprinter, on the podcast last year. And he's been a tremendous guide for me to tune into that aspect of my holistic health. And so that may be surprising to people to hear that a low back issue or even an upper back issue or some sort of anything that emanates from the spine on out can be sourced in the foot, can be shoulder related to the hip. Now, diagnosing those weaknesses or imbalances, that's where you do need a trusted professional. And that's a level that I'm striving to elevate myself to so that I can be of service to people. I know a little bit. I mean, you can look at people and just see how off their gait or their posture is or their carriage, so to speak. And that can give you some clues. However, this is the great fun of whenever we are struggling, we become the investigator. We become the Sherlock Holmes for our own health. And if you take away something here, I mean, this is the evolution of healing, and of course athletic performance as well, is that in these tensegrity structures, if you accept that we are more akin to a tensegrity structure, where we falter under strain is at the weakest point. And so, I mean, that's why you want to be hard to kill. That's why you want to train smartly the strength of all aspects of your body, because wherever we are weakest, I mean, yeah, that's where, I mean, you can have it. If I can clean up my delivery here to say that you might have an imbalance that produces a weakness. You may have a literal foot imbalance because you're in shoes all the time, and you really have no relationship with the fascia and musculature and ligaments in your feet. And so that can lead to a weakness in your hip or in your pelvis or in your knee or calf or Achilles or wherever. So again, to drive this point home, if we are in a tensegrity structure, the load that is causing pain or strain in the low back may be sourced somewhere else. The real world example given here in my notes is that when you sprain an ankle, your body adapts its posture to protect the injured foot. This shift in alignment affects everything from the hip to the lower back and shoulders. So with injuries, again, I was harping on the fact that imbalances are usually what we encounter first. However, if you do end up with an injury, I think that especially demands that we embrace a holistic healing approach, because of the compensation that comes from, I mean, and it's not even just breaking. I mean, if you just have a little twinge of something, if you have, a little tweak of something behind your knee or up on your shoulder, your body then has to compensate. And so how do you reverse that? One such suggestion is that you still need to give your body space, or you need to give the fascia space in the surrounding areas, so that that whatever particular point in your body is experiencing pain is able to dissipate and distribute that pain into the stronger systems. I think there's a good argument to be made for that approach, and that's why I'm so committed to these days to my practice of myofascial release. So we'll keep it to these three examples for today. I think are these particular pillars of the tensegrity discussion, because it's going to absolutely be a theme of how I talk about, because I mean, maybe if your imagination is anything like mine, you can see how we might be able to expand our perspective of other systems. But Your body is one of the greatest projects you'll ever work on. So again, that's why I have such a love for this work and these topics, because they are universal. I mean, my message is to literally everyone. So as always, if you find this helpful for yourself, or you know someone in your life who could benefit from a perspective shift like this, I always appreciate the share and the forwarding of the podcast. The self-stabilizing concept of tensegrity is another fascinating piece of this puzzle. The tensegrity system doesn't rely on rigid support, but rather dynamic balance, which I talked about earlier. In the body, this means muscles, tendons, and ligaments constantly adjust to maintain stability. I was getting ahead of myself, but standing upright is a dynamic process where muscles make small adjustments to keep the body balanced over the feet. The tension and compression in your musculoskeletal system must allow this. So this does warrant a suppleness. The rigidity, I mean, if you flex too hard, first of all, you'll pull something, or you'll have a hernia, which I wouldn't wish on anyone. But yeah, this rigidity, we see people, I mean, especially a lot of athletes, yes, are graceful and powerful and violent in their own right. It is, and yet in the fraction of 1% that we watch on television, there are the standouts who we see to be more fluid, more supple. Roger Federer is one of our favorite examples of that. I just think there's a high level of intelligence that maybe he was cognizant of. I don't know. But his fascial system, also, he was one of the healthiest athletes of his era, when his greatest rival, Rafa Nadal, I think he missed something like 14 Grand Slam events that he couldn't play in. That seems like a lot. I mean, there's 4 per year. He's played for 20 years. So yeah, I mean, that could be very much the case with injuries. And it's not as though most of them are soft tissue-ish injuries, although they are. One point I feel I'm neglecting to emphasize here is that fascia surrounds all of these minutiae in our bodies, as well as our organs. And again, Paul Chek, massive gratitude to his role as a teacher, because he has edified people, not just myself, but the whole Chek Institute, on especially the relationship between the spine. I mean, all of our organs are stored at our root chakra and above. So therefore, our upper body, our spinal system, has a relationship to all of those organs, and it is fascia that is enveloping all of those organs as well. So the more love and care and attention we give to our fascia, then we are supporting the nourishment of our organs as well, so that we can have optimal I mean, that is one of the definitions of health, is optimal organ function. You can get people who are not very impressive in their muscular appearance, and yet they can still have impeccable health, and that is the optimal function of the organ system. So this is the magical web of fascia in the tensegrity system that gives us the I think this newly empowering view of health, where we can work on ourselves. I mean, yes, they're employing a body worker or someone like that for someone who experiences a fair amount or has experienced a fair amount of trauma, then I mean, you might need a special level of help. But what you can achieve with a medicine ball, a Theracane, a tennis ball, a lacrosse ball, golf ball, take your pick, can be absolutely transformative. And one prescription I feel good about making in terms of how we interact with that is that it seems to be around the 2 to 5 minute mark. So what most people think of as myofascial release, they think of foam rolling, which again, there's a metaphor in here of you're spreading butter over too little butter over too much toast. If you're just rolling your whole I T-band over and over again. Okay, 10 up and down and I'm done. Boom. Then I'm gonna go squat 300 pounds. Low and slow is certainly the hallmark of this particular bodily practice. Having a spot or at least a small area that you're working in for. I mean, you can see if you get that tension and that grimace in your face, you get that resistance to, for instance, having a tennis ball on a certain part of your lower calf, just above your Achilles. 2 minutes can seem like a heroic dose of release there, up to 5 minutes, because it's in that time range that the fascia starts to release the acid buildup. And this is actually the perfect bridge into the discussion around tissue salts, because that acidity, high level of acidity, usually results in disease. And so what you get in that 2 to 5 minute mark is that you start to release the acid buildup, which can create the adhesions in the fascia, and that's when you can free up a little bit more hydration. It's always a good idea to hydrate, especially with electrolytes or fruits, or have a nice cucumber with you, or even in your water. That's greater bang for your buck. Is to be hydrating, to further stultify this great practice, to be hydrating through not just the water process, but also through the release process. Because what we're looking for is this integrity in tension, this tensegrity for the fascia. And that's going to give you the more, I was going to say subdued, but just relaxed, fluid and supple your fascia is, then you have the capacity to retain an immensely higher number of molecules. What that adhesion is dehydration and a high level of acidity, which rebuffs your the water molecules entering the fascia there. So certainly you do the hydration, but it's the proper movement. We talk about great movement as greasing the grooves. You do develop a certain level of fluidity in your fascia if you're moving appropriately. If you move rigidly or with too much load or too much strain, then you inhibit your ability to free up certainly your bodily functions. But yeah, the regenerative and the restorative aspects of healthy fascia, which is why we would be wise to bring in the tissue salts. Bam. So, part of the reason that this has captivated my attention is the astrological dimension to what we're talking about here. So, although there are conventionally 7 chakras, there are 12 in Thomas Myers systems, which we were just talking about with tensegrity and fascia. There are 12 fascial meridians. And I believe that's the same in certain practices of acupuncture and classical Chinese medicine. So it's not, there's space, there's room inside for all of these traditions. And there's a particular focus in the tissue salts on bringing in the astrological bent, because, well, first of all, there are 12 classical tissue salts, which I'll name in a moment. And there is a really interesting argument in this philosophy that promotes the idea that because we are all in the gestation period and in the womb for 9 months, and there are 12 months out of the year, there are 12 houses of the zodiac, we have natural deficiencies, which would equate to about 3 houses, 3 signs, or 3 tissue salts. And I'll share this document. I think it's a must-have resource for people, at least to light the wick of this eternal flame of curiosity in how we can heal it with timeless practices. So this will be a great reference for you if I've piqued your interest, and you can determine for yourself if there are aspects of dis-ease, high acidity, certain, I mean, there's also psychological elements here as well. But however you want to depict it, if you see in the preceding, in the signs that are the three that you would be deficient in. So if you're, I'll get into some examples here because this can get sort of technical. But what I find probably the most compelling is that, I mean, this isn't exclusive just to tissue salts. The 12 houses of the zodiac are associated from the head on down to the feet. The first house, the first sign being Aries and the cerebrum, because we do begin our physical development from the head on down. And the last things to develop are our feet. So let me run through this real quick before we dive into just this elementary discussion of the tissue salts, and I'll refer everyone to some longer presentations on it with Steve Falconer and the people at Alpha Vedic, so you can have, like I said, just even more of a plethora of resources to tickle your fancy with this. So the physiological aspect correspondence of the head is with the first house, which would be the sign of Aries, and the psychological correspondence is ego and self-assertion. Makes sense. This is where we think of our identity first and foremost, especially in this day and age where we are so ego heavy. The second house is the throat and neck, which is related to possessions and values. The third house is the lung, chest, arms, hands, and nerves, which is psychologically related to communications, transport, learning, neighbors, and relatives. The fourth house has a relationship with the stomach and breasts. That would be home, family, and security on a psychological level. The fifth house is the heart and back, which is associated with creativity and children. That's the fifth house. The sixth house is associated with the abdomen, intestines, and the psychological correspondence of work, health, duty, and coworkers. The kidneys and lumbar spine are associated with the seventh house and relationships and partnerships. The eighth house, as we continue the descent into the colon, genitals, bladder, rectum, and lower back, which I believe really rounds out our organ system. That, of course, is psychologically related to sex, transformation, shared possessions, inheritance, and power struggles, interestingly enough. Our hips and thighs in the ninth house are related to religion, law, and higher education. The 10th house of skin, knees, and bones is corresponding with career and reputation. The 11th house, related to, on the physiological level, circulation, calves, and ankles, has a physiological correspondence with friends, groups, goals, and objectives. And last but certainly not least, our foundation that we have given a lot of credence to, the feet, as the 12th house, unselfishness, psychism, and the unconscious. Interesting that we go from head and the ego and self-assertion down to the 12th house and the feet, which would be the unconscious, which some would say the earth retains a level of our unconscious or subconscious mind. So, I mean, again, I'm sprinting through this. This is why this is such a great resource sheet. This is basically a cheat sheet on how to start engaging with these things, although I'm going to be linking to some other databases for your benefit. But this is a recommendation at the bottom of this chart for the use of tissue salts. Should always recommend the salt corresponding to the sun position of a person, always recommend the salt corresponding to the position opposite the sun. So that's heavy on the astrology side. What I want to delve into now is, I think there's a bit of a simpler breakdown of these tissue salts and how you can use them. So there's also a great book which revisits the, I mean, again, just as a simple supplementation of see, these are all the combinations. I mean, this is so profound and exponentially useful in just our day-to-day. So this is purely homeopathic. I think these are staple items to have in your pantry, in your supplement closet. And you can see, I mean, just how detailed the breakdowns are of all this stuff. What I am looking to, this will be fine right here, just to get into an introduction to what exactly these mean for your health, would be having an understanding of the principal functions of these tissue salts and where you can plug and play. And they are just that. They are a plug and play. I mean, there are very few things that we would take on a daily basis. Although if you do have some chronic deficiency or something that you're really committed to improving over the next, I would say 60 days, then these are worthwhile investments. They're not expensive. You can get them in bulk. You can buy them specific to your particular malady and focus on, just dosing yourself with these. And I say dosing, I mean, there's no major felt effects. I mean, this is just to get you better. This is